Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
If I told you why we are talking about this today, I would have given you a clue to a riddle that I want to start this with. So here is the riddle. What is common between the following names? And please hear as I read out this list. This is like the who's who or the Hall of Fame of Indian politics. This is Atal Bihari Vajpayee, L.K. Advani, Murli Manohar Joshi, Arun Jaitley, Rajnath Singh, Lalu Prasad Yadav, Mulayam Singh Yadav, Nitish Kumar, Ramvilas Paswan, Sushil Kumar Modi, H.T. Devagowda, George Fernandes, Chaudhry Charan Singh, Prakash Singh Badal, B.S. Yediyurappa, and then carry on Kalraj Mishra, late Anant Kumar, etc., etc., etc. So you can't even say they are all from the BJP because they are not. You can't even say they are all from opposition parties or what used to be Congress parties, opposition parties. That is also not true because many of them are allies. Then if you think that Congress people are not in this list, so I will tell you, there is Siddaramaiah, the Chief Minister of Karnataka, now senior Congress leader in Karnataka, and also Shankar Singh Waghela. So what is common between all of them? And if you think that this list is not confusing enough, I will add more to it. Sitaram Yechuri, Prakash Karat of the left. I will also add Narendra Modi, Subramaniam Swamy, Ram Jethmalani. And then Vasundhara Raje, Jyotiraditya Scindia, Yashodhara Raje Scindia and Naveen Patnaik. So what is common between them? So let me now make a statement that will tell you why we are talking about this today. All of them come from the University of Indian Politics or University of Indian Democracy called the Emergency. And we are talking today on the 45th anniversary of the Emergency. Because you know what? Political leaders, all leaders generally arise from a crisis. Because a crisis gives you an opportunity. A crisis is when extraordinary people shine and then they are marked out. In politics in particular, the history of politics tells you that new leaders arise from popular movements. So the first lot of India's political leaders rose from the freedom movement. They were of the left, right, center, far right, far left. They all came under one umbrella. Mahatma Gandhi built a large enough tent for them. They joined hands. They fought for freedom. Then in the course of time, they kept on going their own ways because many of them had different ideologies. So it may have been Subhash Chandra Bose first and some others later, and then as Nehru became preeminent after Gandhi, then a lot of people of the Congress's right left. Some became right-wing parties and some right-wing, not in the sense that we see today, right-wing sort of libertarian parties, but some also then later became the Congress O. So that was a split group of Congress which claimed to be the original Congress which Mrs. Gandhi defeated. After that, not much has happened to produce a new set of leaders in India. So the next such event to produce entirely a new crop of India's political leaders was the Emergency. So what's common between all these, and why do I say they are all students, all alumni from a University of Democracy called the Emergency? Because all of them or their parents, in case of Naveen Patnaik, Vasundhara Raje, Yashodhara Raje, so all of them or their parents from whom they've inherited the legacy were in Mrs. Gandhi's jail during the Emergency. Some for a short while, some for a long while. Of these, I'd say that there are variations. Some were in jail for 19 months, some were in jail for a much shorter period like say Prakash Karat, and also some were not in jail but still they were fugitives during the Emergency. Narendra Modi, you've seen pictures of him in a Sikh beard and turban. Subramaniam Swamy, who worked up underground and then went overseas and make a surprise appearance in India and again disappeared. Ram Jethmalani, who had a warrant against him but somehow was able to escape to Canada. So Jethmalani and Swami lived overseas for quite a lot of the time. Narendra Modi, in fact, when Swami went to Gujarat to meet an important then Jansangh functionary, he was received by a young Narendra Modi. That is something you read in Kumi Kapoor's book on the emergency. So all these people are emergency pirit, or all of them are victims of the emergency. That is one way of looking at it. The other way is that if they had not been sent to jail and if they had not fought back together against Mrs. Gandhi during the emergency, then this wonderful panoply of opposition leaders would not have come up in India. And they are not just opposition leaders now, an entire generation of non-Congress leaders has come up across the country. Essentially, Mrs. Gandhi unwittingly, obviously this wasn't her purpose, her purpose was to destroy all opposition and break their will. But that is now not how it works in democracies. What she did was, she locked all these people together. So if the emergency was their university of democracy, then the jail was their classroom. They were not all in the same jail. They were scattered in jails all over the country. But I am saying metaphorically that the jail was their classroom. So today, it's almost not possible to find anybody in national politics outside of the Congress party who did not spend time in her jail or whose parent or a close family member did not spend time in jail. In fact, today we have an article on ThePrint.in by Gopal Krishna Agrawal, who is a BJP national spokesman. In fact, I'll give you a link of that article, who was jailed as a 13-year-old because he shouted slogans with a couple of other children, and they were locked up for some time in what was called a jail for minors, such as those jails are and such as those jails were those days. And even he spent 3 months in jail. So each one of these people rose to something. If you look at Narendra Modi's cabinet, even today, anybody over the age of 60 there has spent time in Indira Gandhi's jail. So that is how Indira Gandhi actually funnily set up this University of Democracy, of which she was the founding Vice Chancellor and Dean. Of course, in the process, it built this marvelous opposition to her, because of which finally everything takes time growing up. And as this matured, this leadership, and they took away Congress party's vote banks and Congress party's central proposition to, in some cases, to mainstream Hindus, and in some cases to marginal sections. It could be the Dalits, it could be the other backward castes, it could be the Muslims. As others rose, Congress party lost out. And I dare say that if Mrs. Gandhi had not committed this blunder of the emergency, during which she locked up all these people in jail and gave them this big halo and aura, martyrdom, also they paid the price, they paid their dues. It's not a nice thing to be in any jail, not even for a day. To have your liberty taken away is a very painful thing. In this case, it happened for 19 months or thereabouts for most of these people. And other things happened. Because they were locked up in jail, they had to spend time together. I hear accounts from Mr. Advani and others of how people who were otherwise bitterly opposed to each other, the socialists, Lohiites, the Jansanghis, they all playing volleyball together in jail. Because what do? You play together, you hang around together, you exchange thoughts and notes, and you also then figure out who their common adversary is. And that's when these national coalitions began to come into place. So we saw after the emergency, Jayaprakash Narayan, who was also detained during the emergency, and I will tell you just in a minute towards the end something about him. He put them together and they joined together in a party called Janata Party. That did not last. It did not last on what was called as the dual membership issue. So the socialists there and the secularists there said that you can't be a member of two organizations, which means people like Advani, Vajpayee, Vijay Kumar Malhotra, they could not continue to be members of the RSS while being members of the Janata Party. So that became the ideological basis of the breakup, but there were also many personal antagonisms and personal rivalries, because everyone thought everyone else as an equal. Even Morarji Desai was seen as an equal. They might have all spent time in jail, but if Morarji could become Prime Minister, why couldn't Charan Singh become Prime Minister? Or why could, in the course of time, why couldn't Jagjeevan Ram become Prime Minister? So there were many competing ambitions. But see the marvel of politicians being thrown together in jail. Until then, the Akali Dal and the Jan Sangh then, which is the earlier form of the BJP, until then, Akali Dal and the Jan Sangh in Punjab were sworn enemies. They could not stand each other. In fact, the entire Punjabi Suba movement, which was a demand for a Punjabi-speaking state to be carved out of what was then combined Punjab, which later became Punjab, Haryana, Himachal. There, the RSS and Jan Sangh opposed the Akali Dal. And I have seen those processions on the streets. I have seen those riots on the streets. It wasn't a good relationship at all. But it's only when leaders of the Akali Dal, including Mr. Badal, and top leaders of the Jan Sangh spent time in the jail together. Madanlal Khurana, for example, in particular, because he became the glue that finally brought the Akali Dal and then later BJP together. They spent time together and they realized that one, they were all nationalists, whatever their approach to their politics. And second, for them to have any future in politics, they had to pool in their resources. So such unlikely alliances came in. You want to see other unlikely alliances? Look at George Fernandes and other Lohiites and other socialists who joined hands with the BJP at various points of time. George Fernandes, Ramvilas Paswan, who had expected Nitish Kumar that they will join hands with the BJP. But once again, because they spent time together, a lot of personal equations developed. And what do politicians do when they are in jail together as political prisoners? They talk politics. So as they talked and talked and talked, and in the jail there is plenty of time, a lot of common areas of agreement were found. So once again I am saying that if Mrs. Gandhi had not committed this blunder, which in a way became a favor to Indian democracy and politics, but if she had not done it, her party would not have been reduced to 44 the last time and 52 this time, because she is the one who created this. Now, let me go over some of these individual cases. We mentioned to you that Naveen Patnaik's father was in jail, Biju Patnaik, and then founded BJD. We mentioned to you about the Scindias, Vasundhara Raje, Yashodhara Raje. Now even Jyotiraditya Scindia has ended up in the same party. So his grandmother was in jail. Sushma Swaraj, very interesting case. Now Sushma Swaraj was not in jail, but Sushma Swaraj made her fame because she and Swaraj Kaushal, her husband, they were both lawyers. They were both several years our seniors in Punjab University. They were full-fledged lawyers when we became students there. So they went to Bombay to defend George Fernandes when he was arrested. So they also made their fame because of an excess of the emergency. Then I will give you some really remarkable examples. 3 young Turks of the Congress party. Now these are young Turks of the Congress party who had opposed Mrs. Gandhi very strongly within the Congress party. Who were these? They were Chandrasekhar, Ramdhan, Mohan Dharia, Krishan Kant. 4. Sorry, I misspoke, not 3 but 4. These 4 were called young Turks of the Congress who had opposed Mrs. Gandhi, her personality cult, etc., 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 and were thrown out and later sent to jail. Remember, of the 4, 2 later became cabinet ministers, but the remaining 2, one became the Vice President of India, Krishan Kant, and the other became the Prime Minister of India, that is Chandrasekhar. In fact, it might look counterintuitive, but it's not, because it's logical in terms of what I am trying to explain or declutter for you, because this is really India's post-77 or post-independence, I would say, political history in a nutshell. No non-Congress Prime Minister of India since 1977, except one, was not in Mrs. Gandhi's jail or a victim of the emergency. That one exception is VP Singh. He was then too young in any case and not in a politics that bothered Mrs. Gandhi at all. Inder Gujral, you might say, he was not in jail, but he lost his job during the emergency because he opposed the emergency and he questioned Mrs. Gandhi's policies. So, if now in 45 years, in fact in 47 years, nobody has been able to become Prime Minister of India who was not either in her jail or her victim. Narendra Modi was her victim because he had to stay in disguise and hide. He was in hiding. That is the contribution that. So, how is it that the same opposition was not able to get their ranks together against Mrs. Gandhi earlier? Now, if you go back to India's political history, 1967 is when Sanyukt Vidhayak Dal was set up. There was a lot of disaffection in the Congress. A lot of leaders were going out and others were coming in. So, Sanyukt Vidhayak Dal gave Mrs. Gandhi a scare in 1967 but could not win. And then as the Congress split and Mrs. Gandhi took that hard left or socialist turn, Congress's old organization, it was called Congress O as an organization, it was dismissed as Congress Old, and Indira Congress was the new Congress. So by 1971 elections, these opposition parties had set up a grand alliance. That could not stand up to Mrs. Gandhi because Mrs. Gandhi just said, वो कहते हैं इंदिरा हटाओ, इंदिरा जी कहते हैं गरीबी हटाओ. So in 1971, it was a killer slogan and these people did not have a sufficiently strong appeal against her. And then they did not stay together. They kept on breaking up, rejoining, breaking up, rejoining on ideological grounds, other grounds. So they basically had three charges against Mrs. Gandhi. One, that she is perpetuating dynastic rule. Correct. Second, that she indulges in authoritarian politics. Second charge also correct. Third, that she has enforced the emergency. Now, if you bring in the third one, only then the first two are taken as proven. So a lot of the voters who were not convinced and a lot of the leaders who were not convinced that she was such a big threat to India's democracy because of her dynastic politics, because of her authoritarian politics and corruption, the three things, the emergency convinced them. It convinced many of these voters in the middle. It also convinced many of these leaders of various ideologies to sink their ideological differences and get together and to defeat Mrs. Gandhi. To that extent, you don't like the my parallel of jails being universities or classrooms. I can say if these were going to be the troops of tomorrow, of the opposition or generals of tomorrow, then the emergency jails were the boot camps that Mrs. Gandhi set up for them. Now see what happened after that and check out our proposition that political leaderships rise from mass movements. Since the emergency, what mass movements have taken place which have produced our leaders? So one would be the Mandal phase of 1989 onwards. Then the BJP produced leaders, Vinay Katiyar, Uma Bharti, many others. I am not sure if Yogi Adityanath emerged at that time, but maybe he did. Maybe somebody can tell me more about it. Kalyan Singh, on the other hand, was in jail during the emergency, so he doesn't count there. And some leaders came up at that time also on the Mandal side. So Lalu, Mulayam, who had become leaders earlier, now rose because of Mandal. And because of Mandal then, in that milieu, Mandal versus Mandir, also Kanshi Ram and Mayawati rose. So these people rose out of that mass movement. That was the second one after the emergency, but a small one confined to the Hindi heartland. To an extent, you can say even Devagowda, but Devagowda, as I told you, had the emergency box checked on his CV. Then you had the Anna Hazare movement, which I had also written then, is one more mass movement that will now produce leaders for tomorrow across parties. And once leaders are produced, they move across parties as the emergency showed us. That, however, so far has been a disappointment because what is left of Anna Hazare movement is one preeminent leader, one other leader who's respected but works in the shadow of the other preeminent leader, that is Kejriwal and Sisodia, but both with a very local appeal, and then a bunch of very articulate spokesmen and two very respected dissidents, that is Yogendra Yadav and Prashant Bhushan. So once again, look at where leaders come from. Leaders come from mass movements. leaders also come from processes where they pay their dues. So the emergency is something where Mrs. Gandhi unwittingly made so many of these bright, reasonably young people pay their dues, and in the process, she basically prepared the ground for Congress party's destruction that has now lasted almost 3 decades. Never mind that Congress party has come to power twice during these decades. And I told you, I will tell you something about Jayaprakash Narayan in conclusion. So here it is. During the emergency, he was detained, but not in a jail. He was far too respected and far too sick to be kept in a jail because he had uncontrolled diabetes. And remember, in 1975, 6, 7, diabetic care was not a fraction as good as it is now. And his kidneys were not in good shape. So he was detained in the PGI, or what is in its full form, Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research in Chandigarh. My first beat as a reporter, among other things, was the PGI in Chandigarh in 1977 as I joined the Indian Express, and the paper started there after the emergency. Now, as that started, there was a big controversy because while JP was in detention, his kidneys completely failed. In fact, that is when India imported its first dialysis machines in Jaslok Hospital in Bombay, and we all heard about something called a dialysis machine. Also, dialysis machines that used to be very big and cumbersome, not like they are today. So this was imported for him, and JP's kidneys became a big national story. And there were insinuations and suspicions that Mrs. Gandhi had conspired with the doctors at the PGI in Chandigarh to get his kidneys damaged. There was an inquiry held in that under a Dr. Alba who came from Bengaluru, I remember, and because I was covering that institute, I was also covering that story. So it was in the course of doing that story that Raj Narayan, who was then the maverick health minister of India, remember, Raj Narayan was the original Lalu Yadav of Indian politics. And he is the one who defeated Indira Gandhi in Rai Bareli in that election. He was health minister, and PGI is under the health minister's charge. So he came to the PGI to talk to doctors, but essentially also to figure out what had happened with JP's kidneys there, and to also give a political message to JP's followers that the government was serious about it. It just so happened, reporters' luck, that I happened to be at the PGI. So you see a couple of pictures of me with Raj Narayan and then director of PGI, Dr. Chutani, with a shaven head. He used to shave his head, unlike me. So like all socialists, Raj Narayan had a lot of time for journalists, even if they were young, unknown journalists. So he had me sit next to him in a car, sort of pack into the car with him. He chatted me for a long time. So see these pictures, they take you back 43 years. Also, don't miss the fact that I'm still wearing my college blazer with the college crest on it.